As a place for investment, Indonesia is increasingly becoming an attractive destination for foreign businesses in the region. To look more closely at the growth of Indonesia's economy and foreign investment there, I spoke earlier to Dr. Muhammad Chatib Basri, the chairman of Indonesia's Investment Coordinating Board. Dr. Basri, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Whitney.
Are you concerned that the new foreign ownership caps on investment will be viewed by the rest of the world as protectionist?
Well, so far, I haven't seen a major negative response regarding some government policies, because our latest figures regarding this foreign direct investment still shows that FDI remain robust until during the first quarter of 2012, which grew by 30%. Of course, I do understand there are some concerns from investors, which is consider or perceive that some of the Indonesian policy, the Indonesian government policy, perceived being a protectionist. But so far, I haven't seen a major impact on that.
So what prompted the central bank to introduce these sorts of measures?
Well, I think one of the argument is the central bank is afraid that if this ownership is concentrated only to one particular company, so one particular owners, if something happen with this company or this owner, this will have an impact on the sustainability of the banking sector. Whereas probably there is some justification of it, but in my view, we also need to look at the interest of the investor, because in the future, what Indonesia need is the strong banking system. And if you're talking about this strong banking system, it means that the banking sector need to be well capitalized. So that is why we have to accommodate the view from the foreign investor as well.
Earlier in the year, several ratings agencies, Moody's and Fitch, upgraded Indonesia to investment grade. Did that see a flood of foreign investment to the country?
Yes, it is. That is why, as I said to you earlier, that the growth of the foreign direct investment during the first half of 2012 already reached about 30% per annum. And if you're talking about value, we already reached about $12 billion US. So by the end of the year, I would expect probably the foreign direct investment will reach about 24 to 25 billion US, with a record high in our history. And you know, this is the first time in our history after the Asia financial crisis that investment become the major contributor to the Indonesian economic growth. After the Asian financial crisis, the source of growth always driven by the private consumption. But at the second half, during the first half of 2012, investment play a more important role than private consumption. This is also an evidence that improvement of the investment grade actually attract investment come to Indonesia.
There's been a 20% fall in the benchmark price for coal. How difficult has that been for Indonesia's resources sector?
Well, first of all, you know, when a country rely on commodities, there will always boom and bust. This is something that inevitable. When the coal price went up to reach about $120 US per barrel, of course, many Indonesian gain because of this very high coal price. But when the coal price went down to become $80 US, then many of the companies are suffered towards it. So I think the issue is how to sort of like smoothing this volatility. That is why the Indonesian government also encourage that the companies not only to rely only on natural resources or the cheap labor, but in stages we have to move into what we call the higher value added as well. But of course, when I'm talking about this higher value added, it doesn't mean we'll become protectionist or we are going to abandon the natural resources. We have to do it in stages. We have to do it in right timings and not hurt the investors.
Well, China is a large consumer of coal. Are you concerned that the slowdown there in China, which many predict will continue, will have a detrimental effect on the coal sector in Indonesia?
Yes, of course, and I think this is not only has to do with the slowing demand from China, but also we also need to understand about the U.S. is producing the shale gas now, which make U.S. become geopolitically less dependent to the Middle East will make the oil price is probably decline as well. When the energy price decline, the commodity price, including coal, decline as well. This somehow will affect sort of like our export to China. Yeah, and with the declining our export to China, and people outside Java with this produced coal commodity will also be affected. That is why the role of this government policy in anticipating this situation is very important, and our government is already prepared with the crisis management protocol. We also prepared the social safety net.
Obviously, the coal industry is very important to Indonesia's economy, but what other sectors is the Investment Coordinating Board trying to stimulate to help the economy?
Well, one of the most important sectors in Indonesia is the domestic market. The mining sectors, the coal sectors is export-oriented, but the share of export in our GDP is only 25%, and the rest of the economy, 75%, focus on domestic economy. And that's the reason why we survived the global financial crisis in 2008. So if, let's say, the commodity price collapse, then we focus on domestic market, which is in Indonesia, with the population 240 million, and this 240 million people is about 42% of the total population in ASEAN, in Southeast Asia economy. So you can imagine that the domestic demand will remain strong. So even though commodity price collapse, then we can continue to rely on these consumer products, the domestic market product, which will save Indonesia for the next couple of years.
Dr. Basri, thanks for joining the program.
It's a pleasure, Whitney.